Recently I won the prestigious Daiwa Pole Masters, and today I'm going to show you exactly how I won it. The method I decided to use for the 3 days was fishing worms, but fishing worms on the bottom. Now this venue is dominated by a lot of shallow fishing, a lot of fishing to cover and a lot of fishing shallow in open water. But sometimes you draw the pegs that aren't catered to that, so we're on 38 today on the new pool, and this is where fishing on the bottoms with worms really scores well. The reason for not fishing shallow is purely because this peg is really narrow. It's probably only 10 metres from my peg across the point of the island, and also it's only very shallow. You're talking 18 inches to 2 foot on average. Now I always feel as if you're never going to gather up a lot of fish in shallow water like that to actually catch them shallow. So that's where not putting too much pressure on the peg, fishing on the bottom and just ticking off, I think it gives more longevity to your peg in the long run. So when it comes to start the session with worms, I tend to fish a little bit further than most people do. A lot of people like to start short on pellets, but one place I've found is brilliant at Tunnel Barn to start with is just on the slope as it comes up towards the far side. Today we're fishing probably 10 metres, so that will always be my starting point. Slightly deeper water. You can normally drop in there, just on that silt, you can get a real good run, get you into your match, and then you can sort of start rotating your lines from there on in. I'm going to start off with a decent sized piece of worm. So I'll just nip him through the head, cut him in half, and now what I don't want that worm to start doing is wriggling up around my hook, so I'll just run my forefinger and my thumb just down him and squeeze a little bit of the guts out of him, and there he'll just sit nice and straight. I've got my little excess pole pot on to start, and I've just got a little pot here of neat worms, and I'm just going to fill that up with neat worms, just push it in with my thumb so it doesn't bounce out. In terms of how many lines I've got on the go today, I've got one at 3/4, which is the slightly deeper part of my peg, and then what I've also done is plumbed up tight across, and I've used that same rig and just come in to the inside where I found the same depth, so I can use the same rig on the two, really close to myself, so I can throw a little bit of bait there short to set it for later. Normally I'll have a good start across, catch all my smaller fish, skimmers, F1s, and then I'll push slightly to the shallow water later in the session, and that's where you catch those lovely big old brown F1s. I've got my far bank marker, which are a couple of reeds sticking up on the far side, and this is the slightly deeper line, like our 2.5 foot line. We're going to start here, and the good thing with fishing worms is you will know pretty quick if it's the right bait or not. So I'm just going to hold my little pot on the surface, turn it over, just let that blob out. I don't want it to splat on the surface and open up. So I'll just sneak that in, and then I'm just going to, there you are, look, that's taken that literally as I'm positioning my rig. And that's the good thing with worms is when they're on it, they're pretty easy to catch, and they'll let you know that you're on the right method. Preparing worms is really important for this. Now, a lot of people like to fish worms in peat. Personally, myself, I just like to use neat worms. So what I'll do, I'll get a big handful of worms out of the bag, put it in a bait box, and just leave it for 10 or 15 minutes. And what you'll find is the worms will work their way down to the bottom of the bait box, leaving all the peat on top. And then I simply just pick all the peat off the top, so they're super clean, chop them, and that is it, literally done. If I'm looking to get a few more fish into my peg, if I've had a good run and I think it's easing off a little bit, what you can sometimes do is then add a little bit of peat to your chopped worms, mix it up. That'll give you a little cloud coming off your bait, which can sometimes draw a few fish back in if it goes a little bit quiet. That's a good stamp. That's what we're looking for. They're the kind of fish we're after. 2 pounders. You can soon build a big weight really quickly of those size fish. So I'll gently put him back. And what I always try to do is try to keep the worm on for as long as I can, because what I find is when you've caught a couple of fish on it, it just seems to get better. I don't know, because it gets stretched out a little bit more. But normally the longer you can have that worm on the hook, the better a hook bait it is. So little tiny pot again. Like you've seen from that response, you don't need hardly any worms to get some fish in your peg, and that's what's really good about it. And that's why you want those little pots. When it comes to laying my rig into the peg, I'm not looking for anything fancy. I'm not looking to lay it to the side and let it all swing in nice. All I want to do is get that little blob of worm to the bottom and get my rig straight over the top of it. Because it's only very shallow here, I'm not looking to try and get fish up in the water. I want them down on the bottom. So I simply just put my little blob of worm in, and then straight over the top, I just lower my bulk down where the worm went, hold my rig out 4 inches out of the water, just let it all straighten up, and then just let it just drop straight in. And often, as soon as it drops in, it'll settle up straight under, and that's what we're looking for. Super, super positive. I've got my little bit of pull tip just there, so I know I'm on the right line every time. Really take my time, put that bait in properly. Lift my rig, get the bulk out the water, then just lower it in. Hold it out there, it all straighten up, and then we're dropping it in. I'm going to try not to strike at any of these like little movements. There's obviously a lot of fish there now because you can see the fizzing. So there's a little indication. That felt like a liner. Probably shouldn't have lifted that, but we'll drop it back in. There's a lot of fish there now already. There we go again. And that's why you only want to be using that little tiny pole pot. You can imagine if you had like a large pole pot on there within 2 or 3 feeds, it's going to be absolute murder. I think that's one of the little stockies, yeah. And this is what it was like, sort of the first 2 hours of the session was all about catching little stockies, skimmers, bits and pieces, and then the last part of the session, those bigger, browner F1s turned up. And you can really put a proper weight together then. Right, rigs, super simple. What I've got a nice 8 to 10 prototype elastic there, plenty of guts in that to handle the bigger F1s that we might catch, but also there's loads of little stockies, so I don't want it to be too harsh and ping off them on the way back. Mainline 018, supernatural, nice and durable, and then just above my float there, I've got 2 micro cubes, number 8, just to help me hold that rig in position. If it water starts skimming up a little bit and I'm fishing on a shelf, I want to make sure I'm on my spot. Float wise, I love these. That's a little 0.3 bobby, nice 1.8 mil bristle on there, shows up lovely. I can dot it right down if I want to and still be able to see it, and a little carbon stem. It's a nice short little float because we're only fishing sort of 2.5 foot deep here. And then moving down there, I've just got a little spread bulk there of number 10s. I've got 5 of them there. The furthest one is 12 inches and they work all the way down, and the last one there is 8 inches from the hook. And then 4 inches down from that, another 10 dropper, and then I've got 4 inches on there of 014, that's supernatural, and a 16s SLWG, a nice meaty hook on a big piece of worm. Some big F1s here, and they can run you ragged round the islands and stuff, but there's plenty of power in that hook. It won't open up, and I can get almost every fish I hook in. So that's the rig for starting in the slightly deeper water. And then from there, we're gonna go to the next rig. Everything is identical basically. The only difference here is a shortening pattern. So that same elastic, back shots, same float, but because it's only sort of 20 inches deep there, there's no room in my rig to have like a bulk and dropper. So all I've got there, this is a little bit more positive as well. This has got number 9s on it, and I've just got 5 number 9s in a spread bulk there, just above my 4-inch hook length, just to get my rig to sit really quickly. And if there's a few fish in my peg, they won't waft this rig around so much with those big heavier, shots there in that little spread bulk. Little 4-inch hook length, same 014, 16s SLWG, super simple and really effective. Now, there's another fish there, but what I've noticed already is when I feed in my little bit of worm, there's a few fish coming up shallow for it, so that's telling me that I can move across into that shallower water already. So I'm just going to quickly unhook this one. We've got a nice little run there in that deeper water, but already I feel like the bottom's a bit of a mess, and with the depth, those fish just want to come up off the bottom. So rather than try and catch them shallow, and I don't really like fishing shallow in these shallower pegs like that, I've only got 2.5 foot of depth. I'd rather change depth, so I'm going to go across now onto our further line. So I've got my rig set here, that's at 19 inch, so that should be almost perfect. Again, I'm going to go with a decent sized piece of worm. Just straighten him out so he doesn't all wrap up around my hook. And then I'm going to pop my little pool pot on. I'm just going to go step up to the small size on this, because they might take a little bit more attraction into that shallow water, so they might not come within the first feed or two. I might have to coax them up there, so I'm going to feed a little bit more bait for the shallower water. Pole pots are a really important part of this fishing. Now there's 3 different ones I use for worm. I've got the extra small pole pot. That's brilliant to start your session when you're not sure how much you want to feed. The thing with worms is it's a very, very powerful bait, and you don't need to feed loads of it to get fish in your peg, especially places like Tunnel Barn where the fish are in your area anyway. So I'll start with my extra small. If there's a few like little perch and nuisance fish about and I feel like I need a little bit more worm, I'll move up to the small one. That can be really, really good. And then if I want to put a little bit of peat in with my worms to make like a little bit of slop, what I do then is just put on one of my little fast release pole pots. Because of the shape of it, it just cradles that little bit of slop in your pole pot, and you can just hold it on the surface and it'll all come out really quickly without breaking up. So 3 different pole pots, super, super important for worm fishing. Make sure you've got the right pots for the job. There we are. Next drop in, another clean bite and another decent fish. Now that's the key about fishing over. You do catch those bigger fish and everything's a lot cleaner, but they don't give themselves away. Like down the middle, you know there's fish in your peg, whereas across you can be sitting there thinking they're not coming in, and then all of a sudden you get a little dink and you get a big brown one like, ah look, now they are proper. They're the match winning F1s at Tunnel Barn. When you get on them, you can catch some serious kinds of weights. And that just goes to show perfectly, like, fishing in the right depths of your peg is a really, really important part about like snake lake fishing for F1s. When it comes to how often you're actually feeding your peg, the fish will dictate that to you. If you're catching a little F1 every go in, great, keep it going as you are. But what you'll find occasionally is you get like a little swarm of perch come into your peg, like little tiny ones, and they're an absolute nuisance. So that's where I look to up my feed a little bit, maybe put a bigger pot on, and then feed more regular, because what you want to do is keep the worm going in to draw those F1s back. As soon as you stop putting that worm in regular, you just get swarmed by little perch. So consistency with feed is key. If you've been there and you've missed 2 or 3 bites, come back, fill your pot up, blob it in again and start again. Just flick a few casters in. And they really like this in the festival. When I started loose feeding a few casters, it went absolutely ballistic the second part of my match. But what I can do when I'm fishing down the edge here, I can feed it exactly the same, because I can throw a few casters and then just blob a little bit of worm. That seems a really good way to catch them in that shallow water. So straight away, another fish. So I think that just proves how efficient that little catapult is. Hardly any casters, 6 or 8 casters, you don't need loads. Because it's so shallow and so narrow, I don't want to put too much pressure on them. So I'm going to net this one, and then I'm really keen to have a look in this edge, because if we can catch them as quick as that, but just there, that's how you're going to catch a serious weight. So let's put this one back and then have a little drop down the edge and see if we can really clatter them. And wait till there's some fish in there before you drop in. So I'm just going to feed them my little blob of worms. That's already pulled away there then. So my worms are in, and I'm just going to throw a couple of casters. Got my far bank marker, which is a big tree stump on the other end of the lake. Now when they come on this is where you can do some proper weights. Oh, hello. First drop in, look. Not one of the big ones, but so much more efficient than shipping across. I really like fishing worms on the bottom. Like I touched on earlier on, it doesn't put too much pressure on your peg, and you get a little bit more longevity, whereas often you can fish shallow, get a great run, and it sort of peters out to nothing. That happens a lot here, especially when you get a lot of pressure. So just by fishing a couple of lines on the bottom, you can just keep rotating your lines, just picking fish off, and keep your catch rate up over the whole 5 hours rather than just 90 minutes or 2 hours of your match. There we go. So just by coming back, feeding another little blob, look, we could have just sat there and waited, not caught one. But we've like made that bite happen. So it's just about playing around with your feeding, throwing a few casters, potting a bit of worm in. Nice fish. And these are going to be your rewards, look. Match winners.